Hey, what's going on guys? Zedd here, bringing you another Soul Calibur 6 video. Today I want to discuss why so many players, or how so many players are learning matchups wrong, and what I would do instead. Let me explain. Now this video, for the record, is tailored towards beginner or intermediate level players, but if you feel you're pretty solid at the game, you might learn something from the approach that I'm going to share with you in this video. What I mean by people are doing it wrong is so many players would get bodied by a character in ranked, jump in the lab, look at all their moves, try to look at all the frame data and be like, alright, this is how I'm going to do it. So say with Talim, right? I got dumpstered by a Talim, she was in my face all the time, right? I kept getting counter hit, she has so many attacks, like so many things, like alright, let me go see what she does. And then you pull up her moves list and you're like, oh, crap. You know, like she's got a lot going on here, right? Especially when as soon as you get into, here you go, special moves, right? Her stances, like, oh god, how do I deal with all these? And never mind the moves that transition into the stances. Like, there's just a lot going on for Talim. That is not how you learn a matchup, at least in a basic way, or in a game plan way. I suggest approaching it from something that I'm going to call the general rule or rules concept in this game, or in this matchup rather. There are a couple ways to establish what this general rule is, this vague thing that I'm talking about, and I'm going to show you a very kind of tedious, detailed method of how to do that. But before I do that, I want to explain a way to find the easy answer. Now, by general rule, I mean in 2 or 3 sentences max, how do you play against this character, completely disregarding frame data. We're not even going to discuss it in this video. So if that's what you're after, not the video for you. How do you beat this character? Okay, you're looking at things like, do you play offensively or defensively? What are the different movement strategies that you might be able to employ if you're playing defensively? What are the different like crushing attacks that you could use on offense that are quite good? Crushing or panic moves, meaning like tech crouch, tech jump, sidestep, etc. What is the character good at, and what are they lacking? So therefore, what can I take advantage of, or what can I be cautious of? These questions are how you're going to establish this rule. And it might take a little bit of time, but trust me when I say, you'll learn a lot more about the matchup and have much more success than you will just looking at frickin' frame data. Because frame data takes weeks if not months to learn, and never mind retaining it, right? If I fought a Talim in ranked, and in theory I didn't play one for 3 weeks, do you really think you're going to memorize every single one of her punishes? No, you're not. Instead, it's much easier to remember the gist of how to play against the character, rather than the frames. And I see this pitfall all the time, like, in so many communities, like tons of fighting games in general, on the Reddits, the subreddit, like I see this on the Calibur subreddit all the time. How do I beat blah blah blah, or like, what are the frames of blah blah blah? And it's like, useless. That's not helpful. Or the character Discord, same thing, right? Because people are approaching it incorrectly. So I'm going to go through in the example, like I said, but just before I do that, the quick ways you can find these rules or tips to devise your own rule. Because you know what? What's a generic rule for me may not be the same for you, because frankly, it's going to depend on the character you're playing too, right? That is an aspect of it as well, okay? But I'm going to try to be as simple as I can, and we're going to go over a couple different examples. That way, hopefully it makes sense in the next few if this Talim example doesn't make sense. But the best way you can find the easy ways are look up either guides or go to the character Discord, and specifically look for a tab or section that says like overview or basics or introduction or game plan, gameplay, stuff like that. Look for that keyword and read like, what does Talim do, right? How does Talim play? Because if you can find that, that'll help you way more in figuring out what these rules are. So let's get right into it so I can stop being so vague, and let's break it down. So I'm going to assume that if you're learning matchups, you already have a basic understanding of what the quote-unquote fundamental buttons are in Soul Calibur. Things like an approach button, keep out buttons, horizontal mids, a poke low, right? Do they have launchers that aren't 3B? Do they have like an approaching horizontal mid, or is it just a really stubby one, or stuff like that? I'm going to assume that you're already familiar with that kind of stuff and that you probably have a good understanding of your own character. So let's get right into Talum, enough yammering on. So if you look at Talum and you're like, alright, so her horizontal mid basic button, we're just using 3A for example. There are others, but bear with me. Right? Pretty stubby, right? And even if you do look at others like 22A, not the best range, right? And you can see based off of her actual weapon that she doesn't have that much range. Okay, so if she doesn't have range, she can't keep out. Therefore, she must be able to approach, right? Or she wants to hit a ton of buttons because that's what she did to me in ranked. Therefore, she must be good at keeping up pressure, right? Yeah, kind of. Her approach tools are not that good though. So you would establish like, all right, approach tools usually they're 6-6 input or 2-2, right? So if you do 2-2B, 2-2A, 2-2K, or 6-6B, 6-6A, and 6-6K, you would see that out of all of these, 6-6B has the most range. Okay? So right there you can establish that, okay, Talum's approach game is kind of lacking, but her best option, quote-unquote best option, is duckable as it's high or steppable. That's pretty risky for her, so instead she wants to move in. So, step one that I would suggest, do you want to fight it offensively or defensively? Let's consider offensively against Talum for a second. Okay, if I want to play aggressively against Talum, all of a sudden I'm opening myself up to getting counter hit, and her counter hit damage is pretty good, and her counter hit tools are very good. Her crushing attacks are very good. Again, that means tech jump, tech crouch, sidestep, backstep, yada yada. They're very good. She has a reversal edge cancel. She has a low crushing critical edge. And her post GI game it's okay. It's usable, right? But you're more worried about the counter hits, the crushing moves, the reversal edge cancel. So maybe. And now I'm playing in her effective range. She doesn't even have to do any work to start swinging at me. Okay, so maybe playing aggressively against Talum isn't the play. But what if you play in neutral or defensively against Talum? Okay, now we're getting closer. Because now we've established that her approaching game isn't very good, and the moves that are decent for approaching, they're rather slow, right? They're rather slow. We know that if I can keep her away, big buttons, she's not going to be able to get to me and keep hitting me with all of her attacks, right? So this already, you've answered your question, boom, defensively. But now if you look into it further, you're like, okay, but hold on. If she has all these buttons, right, like this basic string, right, plagues a lot of players. If this is the source of all her pressure, in theory, right, do you really want to take that? Well, yes, because if you block constantly against characters that are heavy on the stance game, eventually they're going to either make a mistake or make the wrong read, and you're going to punish them for it. Okay? So playing against Talum, you typically will want to play defensive as opposed to offensive, and keep her out as best you can if your character can do that. Okay? If your character can't do that, try to play neutral as best you can, but just wait, just chill, because if you start trying to mash into a Talum, I tell you, their counter hit and stuff is going to make you regret it, right? It's not worth your life to play in Talum's effective range for the most part. Big asterisk, big disclaimer there, for the most part. If you want to play the matchup that way, go for it. But this is my video and my advice, so I'm breaking it down for you. So, the general rule against Talum is play defensively, play neutral, and try to challenge her stances. Or try, right? You're going to find that there are some places you can, some places you can't, and that's just going to come with practice and figuring it out. But if you let her just beat on your guard, it's going to break. Okay? To top that off, using reversal edge against Talum, not the best call, but guard impact is a very good call against Talum. Alright? So, defensively, play neutral, GI. Cool. General rule of thumb, we've already established that against Talum, easy. Now, if you're not familiar, again, with what Talem's game plan is, that's where you want to look up like an overview of the character or simply ask somebody and they'll tell you. And then you're like, all right, thanks. And then you break it down from there. Okay. Let's try something, because that's pretty basic, like defensive, neutral, GI. Like, oh, thanks, Zedd. That's literally defense in Soul Calibur, you idiot. Like, all right, look. Let's pick another character that might be a little trickier to deal with, right? So, say you're dealing with someone like 2B. So 2B, right, very common online character. She has ginormous buttons. She has fairly good stances, and her range is like insane, right, on everything, including her pokes, her keep out buttons, even her stance attacks, for God's sake. They have fantastic range. So, how would you play against 2B? Well, this is one of those ones where it gets a little tricky. So, but I'm going to give you the easy way to play against 2B. And then I'm going to give you the more difficult way to play against 2B. And then I'm going to give you how I play against 2B. Because this character, I think, can be played against in a couple different ways, and it entirely depends on both you and your opponent. So let's break her down. So, alright, 2B's approach game. Let's look at that first, because we just finished Talem, and you're like, alright, her approach sucks, so let's just keep her away. But 2B's approach, you're like, okay, 6-6B. Alright, big range. 6-6A. Good range. 6-6K. Alright, non-approach button. Right? For horizontal mid, 3A, for example. Okay, that's really good range. Alright, cool. For 2A, pretty standard. Her low pokes, so 1A, man, that's really good range. 1B, not bad. And 1K, pretty good. So now, her 1B is actually a stance pressure tool. So dealing with the 1B poke is actually quite scary. Because if you take that, then all of a sudden you're getting pressured. But you're like, alright, so if I don't want to get hit by her poke lows, and I don't want to get hit by these, guaranteed mid transitions into stances, I want to play further away then, right? Well, maybe. So if you play further away against 2B, now you're opening yourself up to her really long range, right? So you might get hit by like that, or, that, or, even this. Right, stuff like these, buttons like those. Alright, her 3B, very good range, right? So you don't want to whiff neutral against 2B. Be a big mistake, right? But the thing with 2B is, if she's not like in range of hitting some of her heftier lows, or rather her counter hit stuff, she's not really doing any damage to you. Her guard damage isn't bad, at least on a grounded neutral state. And the thing with her neutral game, I said not to worry about frame data, but for future reference, it's very punishable. Like, most if not every button she wants to throw in neutral is -12 or worse. Okay? So it's very risky for 2B to play neutral or defensively. Therefore, she wants to play offensively. Now remember what I said, you would figure that out just by reading the first paragraph of a 2B guide. They would be like, pros and cons, character is really punishable, right? Stance game is great, right? Stuff like that. So you know that she wants to kind of press the attack. So, we've established she wants to play aggressively, but we don't want to whiff in neutral. Whereas Talem, right, you can kind of throw moves out for keep out and not worry about it. But with 2B, you really don't want to make mistakes and whiff. Don't want to do that. So, what if I play aggressively against 2B? Well, okay. Sure. You can do that. And really, that's not actually a bad game plan. But, because like her counter hit damage is kind of whatever. Her range is huge, but if you're in her face, it's somewhat irrelevant. She's really punishable, as we've already established. Except, now you're playing into the fact that she has a crushing, really good 3B. You're playing into her various low pokes that are fairly good. And you're playing into some of her better stance transitions, right? Like 6BB or, 5 AAA. right? They all have counterplay, but we're not getting into that. The other thing you're going to have to worry about if you're playing in 2B's face is you're going to have to worry about her very powerful, like, crushing attacks. I already mentioned 3B, but now you're going to have to deal with moves like, not that, 4-4A, right? You can see here, huge backstep, right? Huge backstep. Very punishable, but a huge backstep nonetheless. Okay. This thing kills so many players, it's insane. And, you know, if she holds it, right, you're eating a fat chunk of damage. So you're going to have to be really careful about moves like that. And so, offensively against 2B is not bad. But, most 2Bs play aggressively. Meaning that you're not really going to have time to be the one on offense. So, they're going to be stancing you a lot. And if they're stancing you a lot, that's what you're going to have to learn to deal with. Just like Talon. Except, you can't necessarily keep 2B out. So hold on. If I can't keep her out like Talon, but she wants to pressure me like Talon, what do I do? Well, what you want to do is constantly try to play neutral and whiff punish her. Or, again, the frames don't matter too much because all you have to do literally is just go 5AA and that's a punish, right? Is block in neutral. Now I know that sounds silly, just block forehead, but if you just block 2B in the mid-range, she's going to open herself up to dealing damage to herself by being minus on literally everything, right? And so that's something that you're going to have to consider. Even a move like this, which, you know, she could use as like an anti-step tool, right? If you're wrong, or if she's wrong and it doesn't actually catch me stepping, all of a sudden I get a punish, right? So it's very risky for 2B to do that. So she wants to stance. Now, if she's stancing you, we established you don't want to RE against Talon. GI is a little better. But against 2B, it's kind of the opposite. And there's a reason for that. So 2B, when she stances, right, you're going to see this stance more often than not from low mid-level 2Bs. This stance has the low, which goes into a combo, okay, like this, bang, 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 alright, or she obviously has the mid that you would get hit by, okay. She has an evasive option, right, via the bubble, and then she has another evasive option via the rocket fist. Okay, you're gonna see this most often. The thing with 2B is reversal edge is a very powerful tool, because not only is she a rather punishable character, her animations have a hefty recovery to most of them. And all of her stances, all two of them, well, two practical ones that you'll see, have one, sometimes two answers to reversal edge. And so reversal edge is a fairly good option against 2B actually. And you would see that if you ran through her stances. Okay? So a beginner way to play against 2B is to play defensively. Don't throw buttons out randomly and just let her come to you and you can just reversal edge a lot. Obviously that's not a very great strategy, but it is a strategy. Another way to play against 2B is to just play like in her face. Never give her the chance to do anything because she's a little slow. And if you have a character that has the range to challenge something like this, it's actually very good. Or if you're good enough and you're making the read into this, it is a fairly punishable attack. Right? Minus 16. That's very, very good. Now I know I said I wasn't going to fuss with frame data, but against 2B it is rather important. But again, like if you're unsure literally against 2B, you can just throw out your 5AA and you're going to get some damage, okay? So that's in play, is watch out for what they call a backswing blow, right? Or the backstep attacks, and just keep playing in her face. How I play against 2B is I just play neutral the entire game long, because if I'm just constantly jockeying for position and I'm playing at like this range, give or take, there is nothing she can do that she isn't going to risk her life with. That's the gimmick, is 2B, to play neutral with 2B. The 2B is always taking a risk. Always. Okay? Not only are her animations so slow to recover, like I already said, but the frame data, right? So if the 2B goes for something like this move, okay? 2-2B. Let's just say. Look how long you have to recognize that that hasn't happened. And now, like, the entire time the sword is out, or the spear rather, is out, you can punish that, right? So if I'm like just, aha, right? Or even if I was a bit late, aha, right? You have so much time. So I play against 2B strictly neutral. Like, I don't even play the game. I just let her kill herself, kind of thing. And that's what I do about it. So reversal edging 2B, fantastic gameplay. Playing just straight neutral against 2B, really good option. Or playing just in her face if you have a character like, say, Talim, for, you know, to use her as an example, just playing in 2B's face all the time, really, really good option. So as a general rule with 2B in 2 or 3 sentences, I would say, take advantage of the fact that her recovery and her frame data is quite bad. Reversal edging against her stances is a very good option. And challenging her, if you can keep in mind the step back moves, is also a very good option. So that's kind of how you'd play against 2B in a general sense, disregarding frame data entirely. So we've talked about 2 characters who want to be like aggressive, but what if we talked about a character who wants to play defensive, right? What do you do about that? Okay, well let's use an example like, let's use Astaroth for an example, a grappler character, because some players will play him pretty aggressively, but is some risk to doing that. Generally, Astaroth, he wants to make the reads on the throws and take advantage of his great range, as a lot of his key moves are somewhat punishable by a good chunk of the cast. Let's just assume, now obviously Astaroth has a flexible character, I understand, okay, but let's just assume that we're going with the defensive idea, alright? So, again, I'm going to do this one a bit quicker. So, Astaroth, you're assuming he wants to play defensive. Okay, he's a grappler, he does hefty amounts of damage with throws, okay. His launchers are very slow, his buttons are very slow, he doesn't really have any pokes other than 4A. Alright. Cool. But if you just keep hitting buttons in his face, you are risking his crushing attacks. So, a very common one is 6K. This move, although it doesn't look like it, tech crouches high attacks. Okay? But it is punishable. Same with, you know, his 2 different forms of bull rush. They also tech crouch highs. Okay? But he doesn't really have a great low a low crush or a tech jump. He doesn't really have very good sidesteps, and he doesn't have any form of a backstepping attack. So, what he has to rely on, if that's not happening, is, where is it here? Here we go. His armor attacks. Okay. Now, armor, those ones anyway, lose to lows. And if he wants to challenge your lows, he's going to have to start ducking. And he just has to, right? Or if he's calling it out, he can look for crouch throws, but that's really difficult. Okay. So, when you're in Astaroth's face, if you want to avoid throws and beat armor, a good way to do both of those is lows, right? And even in a very, very vague sense, because it depends on your character, even just 2A or 2K are fantastic tools to use up in Astaroth's face, because his frame data and his kit doesn't really allow him to deal with these buttons very easily. Preferably you want to go for poke lows, like for a lot of characters it's 1A, 1K, stuff like that. In Chunghwa's case, you know, 3A. Stuff like that is better, but even just getting used to 2K in Astaroth's face, really not a bad option. Okay. but it's getting in his face. That's the problem. So, Astaroth has a couple of very big buttons that you're going to see more than anything else, right? So, just in a very vague sense, right? You've got 6A, it's huge, right? It's gigantic. Or 6-6A, huge. 2-2B, huge. 5BA, huge, right? So to work your way against an Astaroth, you want to use really good movement, okay? So first off, like I said, step one, you want to play offensively against Astaroth. You want to get that life lead fast, and you want to end the round fast. And the reason why is even if I have a heavy life lead, all he has to do is throw me twice, and I've already taken 40% of my health. Okay? So you want to end the game against Astaroth as fast as you can. You don't want to mess around. There's no time, right? So you want to use good movement to avoid some of his strikes. His moves are quite slow, like I said, so don't be afraid to block. And when you're in his face, use a lot of lows or even tech jumping attacks. Not bad, but just be careful as you know, you can get thrown out of the air like so, and therefore it's not breakable. But you can see it does very little damage, so it's really not the end of the world, right? But preferably, again, lows. Lows, lows, lows. And against some of his slower attacks, if you can just put a bit of practice, especially this one, you can learn to just GI some of these on reaction, or step them accordingly. Okay? Now, in terms of defending against Astaroth, if you want to use, like, be wary that he can just crush your highs no matter what. And then, so you want to use a lot of mids. And lows still, but mids, right? So again, general rules, right? Establish in 2 to 3 sentences, how do I want to fight this character? And again, with Astaroth, it didn't even mention frame data. It really is that simple, though. If you know how to play against a character with your own character in a somewhat tailored way, it's going to go way farther for you. Or rather, you're going to go way farther with that information than you will just playing the exact same way against every single character and being like, oh man, let me learn this matchup, let me look at their frames, like that's going to help me. I can't tell you how many people I see, even like mid-high level players, who play the exact same way against every single character. And that's not good, right? Just because you know the frame data, if you're always playing the same, that means you're always going to be predictable, right? And you're never going to learn and improve. So learning how to be more flexible with your character is a very important thing, and you will learn to do this by addressing each matchup one by one. Like, alright, what can I do against this character in a gameplay sense? Don't even regard the frame data. In a general sense, don't even address the stances either. Although I think you should, but you don't have to, right? If you're playing against like Maxi, 2B, Talum, Nightmare even, Siegfried, right? All of those characters, for the most part, you can either 2A or 2K a lot of their stances, and it's not the worst idea, okay? But it's like, how can I stop them from going into stance in the first place? That's more what you want to be looking at, alright? So, I hope it wasn't too hard to follow. I hope the idea gets across in that don't fuss with the frames. Fuss about the general, how do I beat this character? Take advantage of the resources you have to figure out how that character plays. Figure out some general rules for yourself or with your character that you want to employ to use. And see where those characters' weaknesses are and play around them. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hopefully it helped. If it doesn't really make a lot of sense, I'll try to remake it. But again, general rules, not frame data. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.